Good afternoon, students. So this is video 2.6, conditional statements. Your objective today is I can write converses, inverses, and contrapositives of conditional. And the IExcel skill you want to focus on is I-7. All right, so let's go flippers. So if we remember what we talked about the other day with conditional statements, hypotheses, and conclusions, we're going to start off with this statement we referred to before, which is if I like chocolate, then I like cake. So what we want to do today is develop the idea of related conditional statements. So the first related conditional statement that you need to know is a converse. Okay? And a converse is when you exchange the hypothesis with the conclusion. You basically flip it. So if I remember that the hypothesis was if I like chocolate and the conclusion is then I like cake, and now I flip them to make the converse. Here's the converse. If I like cake, then I like chocolate. And again, it does not have to be true. Remember, we can figure out the truth value of this statement, and we need to know the logical equivalent. So the logical equivalent for this statement is going to be if Q, then P. The next related conditional that we want to know is called the inverse. And the inverse is going to be when we negate the hypothesis and the conclusion of the conditional statement. Again, when we negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion of the conditional. And basically, the short is negating. So if I go back to the original conditional, and that was way up here, and here it is, the original conditional. Now I'm going to go ahead and write the inverse using the original conditional statement. Here is our inverse, and it says, if I do not like chocolate, then I do not like cake. Remember, negating is just when you make something its opposite. So if something is, then it becomes not. If something not, then it becomes is. The logical equivalent for the inverse is clear. If tilde P, which is not P, then tilde Q, which is not Q. So now let's look at the contrapositive, which is our final related conditional statement. And the contrapositive is actually my favorite because you do two things. You negate the hypothesis and the conclusion of the converse. Basically, you take your original statement, here it is, if I like chocolate, then I like cake, and you flip it and you negate. And that's why we have the shorthand that's flip and negate. So let's try it. There it is. It says, if I do not like cake, then I do not like chocolate. And again, all of these statements have truth values. Some of them may be true, some of them may be false, but you can evaluate them very easily. The logical equivalent for the contrapositive is if tilde Q, remember if not Q, then tilde P. Let's try some examples. So for today, the examples are pretty short. We only have two, but they're action-packed. Question number 1 says, what are the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the following conditionals? And what are the truth values of each statement? And if a statement is false, give a counterexample. So here we go. Let's write all of them down. The converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. What you want to do is identify the hypothesis and conclusion of the original conditional statement, and that's what I've done here. Next, we want to find the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. So here's all of our statements. So let's focus on the first one, the converse. So the converse again was to flip. So I took the hypothesis and conclusion and I flipped them. I switched them. So the statement is if the figure is a quad, I shorten quadrilateral. Then the figure is a square. So if you think about it, every quadrilateral has 4 sides. But every quadrilateral doesn't necessarily have to be a square. You could have a rectangle, you could have a trapezoid. So I'm going to draw a trapezoid because this statement is false. And my counterexample would be that trapezoid. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral, it's 4-sided, but it's not necessarily a square. The next one, the inverse. The inverse is when we negate things. So I'm just going to take the original statement and I just negate everything. So if the figure is not a square, then the figure is not a quadrilateral. Now that actually is true because you cannot be a square and not be a quadrilateral. You have to be a square if you're a quadrilateral. All right, contrapositive. The contrapositive says flip and negate. So we're doing two things. We're flipping the hypothesis and the conclusion, and we're negating them both. So if the figure is not a quadrilateral, then the figure is not a square. So if you are not quadrilateral, you're not four-sided, there's no way you can be a square. So that is also true. Okay, so here's question 2 way at the bottom down here where I'm circling. And it says, what are the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the following conditional statement? Okay, and what are the truth values of each? Just like before with example 1. The statement is, if today is Saturday, then yesterday was Friday. So let's look at the answers to this question. The converse, again, the converse is when we flip. So we're going with, if yesterday was Friday, then today is Saturday. If yesterday was Friday, then today is Saturday. And that's actually true. We know that to be true. The inverse, now we're just negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion of the original conditional. And it says, if today is not Saturday, then yesterday was not Friday. And that is also true. And last but not least, the contrapositive is going to be, if yesterday was not Friday. So if yesterday was not Friday, we're both flipping and switching. So we're flipping and negating, excuse me. If yesterday was not Friday, then today is not Saturday. So if yesterday was not Friday, there's no way that today is Saturday. Not on planet Earth. Doesn't work. So that's also true. Okay? So here's your secret hot question for tonight. It says, what is the converse of the statement below? And the statement is, if today is September 30th, then tomorrow is October 1st. What is the converse of that statement? You want to make sure you answer that in the secret hot question. Remember, the IXL skill to work on is I-7. Go ahead and give me an internet high five. Great job. Remember to do your IXL. See you tomorrow.